In the dead of night on July 9th, 1962, hundreds of miles from Hawaii, the sky suddenly rips open, turning midnight into a blinding artificial noon. This was not an alien invasion. It was the moment the United States military detonated a hydrogen bomb in the heavens, an act of hubris so profound it permanently scarred the planet. It risked a catastrophic cascade failure of global technology. But why did they do it? And what was the true, terrifying cost of playing God? The answer begins 5 years earlier with a sound, a simple beep from orbit. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, a triumph that sent a shockwave of profound insecurity through the American establishment. The space race had begun, and the United States was already losing. The heavens were no longer a sanctuary. They were the new high ground, and the enemy had seized it first. Just 1 year later, a discovery changed the strategic map forever. Physicist James Van Allen, using data from America's first satellite, Explorer 1, confirmed the existence of massive belts of radiation girdling the Earth, held in place by the planet's magnetic field. These Van Allen belts were a natural feature of our world, a shield against cosmic rays. But to the paranoid mind of the Cold War Pentagon, they represented something else. A potential weapon. Could a nuclear explosion in space enhance these belts, creating a man-made radiation barrier so intense it would disable or destroy any Soviet warhead or satellite that dared to pass through it? The goal was to turn space itself into a weapon, to deny the high ground to the enemy. The initial tests were small, secretive, and seemed to prove the concept. But the military wanted to go bigger. They initiated Operation Fishbowl, a series of high-altitude nuclear detonations over the Pacific. It was a catastrophe from the start. The first attempt, codenamed Bluegill, launched on June 2nd, 1962. Mid-flight, the rocket's tracking system failed. With a rogue nuclear device tumbling through the sky, the range safety officer had no choice. He pressed the button. The rocket was destroyed, raining plutonium and wreckage across the launch area on Johnston Atoll. The second attempt, codenamed Starfish, occurred just weeks later. 1 minute after launch, the Thor rocket's engine sputtered and died. Again, the destruct command was sent. The rocket and its thermonuclear payload exploded at an altitude of 30,000 feet. The launch pad was annihilated, and the entire island was coated in a fine mist of radioactive poison. The project was a calamitous failure, burning through rockets and contaminating the environment before a single warhead had even reached its target altitude. The third attempt would not fail. On July 9th, a new Thor rocket stood ready. Its payload was a W-49 thermonuclear warhead, packing the explosive power of 1.4 megatons, a force 100 times greater than the bomb that leveled Hiroshima. Its target was a desolate point in the vacuum of space, 400 kilometers above the Earth. At 11 p.m. Hawaii time, the rocket ascended into the darkness. 13 minutes later, it reached its designated altitude, and it detonated. For an instant, the Pacific sky flashed with an incandescent, silent brilliance. The light was so intense that observers on the ground were momentarily blinded. Then the initial flash faded, replaced by an enormous, expanding sphere of blood-red and purple light, an artificial sun born from human ambition. The effects were immediate and shocking. The blast unleashed a colossal electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, vastly more powerful than the project's scientists had predicted. In Honolulu, nearly 1,400 kilometers away, the pulse blew out an estimated 300 streetlights. It triggered countless burglar alarms and opened automatic garage doors across the island. The microwave telephone link between Kauai and the other Hawaiian islands was severed instantly. And then came the aurora. This was no gentle, shimmering curtain of light. It was a violent, otherworldly spectacle. From Hawaii to New Zealand, the sky burned with eerie, artificial color. Witnesses described vast, shifting draperies of red and pink light so vivid they could read a newspaper by its glow. The heavens themselves appeared to bleed for 7 straight minutes. Back in the control rooms, the physicists believed this was the end of the event. The radiation, they assumed, would be captured by the Earth's magnetic field and quickly dissipate. They were catastrophically wrong. The Starfish Prime detonation did not just disturb the existing Van Allen belts. It had been so powerful that it created an entirely new one. It was a permanent man-made ring of intensely radioactive, high-energy electrons, trapped in low Earth orbit. This new belt was thicker, more dangerous, and orders of magnitude more intense than the natural radiation it had joined. The man who discovered the original belts, James Van Allen himself, was part of the project. His instruments were aboard the rocket that carried the bomb. As the data streamed back, he watched in horror as his own equipment registered radiation levels that were off the scale. The very feature of the planet he had unveiled to the world had been corrupted. He had revealed a wonder of cosmic physics. The military had turned it into a radioactive trash heap that would persist for years. The true cost of this celestial vandalism was about to be paid. The new radiation belt was a death trap for the fragile technology just beginning to populate our orbit. The cascade failure had begun. The first victim was Ariel 1, the United Kingdom's first ever satellite. Launched only 3 months prior, it was a symbol of national pride. Its solar panels were savaged by the intense radiation from Starfish Prime, and within weeks, it was dead. The most famous casualty was Telstar. Owned by AT&T, it was the world's first active commercial communications satellite, a marvel of the modern age. That had broadcast the first live transatlantic television pictures. It was the herald of a new, connected future. But that future was short-circuited. Flying through the unexpected intensity of the new radiation belt, its command transistors were fried. By February 1963, Telstar fell silent forever, killed by the lingering ghost of Starfish Prime. In total, at least 1/3 of all satellites operating in low Earth orbit, a precious handful at the time, were damaged or destroyed by the radiation. The United States, in its attempt to control space, had rendered a vast portion of it unusable, blinding itself and the international community in the process. It is simple to label this a story of pure military hubris, but the reality is more disturbing. The Pentagon's lead scientists were genuinely stunned by the outcome. Their models, their calculations, their understanding of the upper atmosphere were proven to be fundamentally, disastrously flawed. The blast's effects were far worse than their worst-case scenarios. This was not merely an act of arrogance. It was an act of profound, willful ignorance. They unleashed the most powerful force humanity has ever harnessed into an environment they did not begin to comprehend. The ultimate sin was not in wanting a weapon, but in proceeding with the experiment despite knowing how little they truly knew. The global political fallout was as swift as the EMP. The undeniable planetary scale of the damage caused by Starfish Prime horrified the world. The event became a powerful, unignorable catalyst that pushed a reluctant world toward a historic agreement. In 1963, President John F. Kennedy and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev signed the Partial Test Ban Treaty, forever banning nuclear explosions in the atmosphere, underwater, and in outer space. Humanity had stared into the abyss of its own technological power and for a brief moment chose to step back. The legacy of Starfish Prime is burned into our modern reality. It stands as a permanent lesson in the catastrophic consequences of environmental carelessness on a planetary scale. And it was the world's first terrifying demonstration of the real-world power of a high-altitude EMP, a threat that now represents a civilization-ending form of warfare. The experiment ended 60 years ago, but its ghost still haunts our skies.